We are so excited to have Sarah and Lauren here today. Sarah and Lauren, I know this is virtual, but this is one of our favorite things to do with booksellers. You really have the field here, the people hand selling the book, the people who've read the book and love the book as much as we do. So we love to kind of create these moments where they can ask questions and just have it be a great, fun Friday discussion. So to explain a little bit about Lauren and Sarah, of course. So Sarah McGrath is the Senior Vice President, Editor-in-Chief at Riverside Books, a division of PRH, which she joined in 2006 after getting her start first at Knopf and then Scribner. Over her nearly 25-year career, Sarah has launched the careers of some of the most important and beloved fiction writers working today. Among the prize-winning New York Times bestselling writers she works with are Britt Bennett, Elizabeth Gilbert, Lauren Groff, Paula Hawkins, Khaled Hosseini, Chang-Rae Lease, Sigrid Nunez, Emma Straub, Gabriel Talent, and Meg Wolitzer. And then, of course, we have Lauren, our star of the moment and author of our current book club pick. She is a multiple-time National Book Award finalist and New York Times bestselling author of the novels The Monsters of Templeton, Arcadia, and one of my personal favorites, though Matrix is now pretty much tied, Fates and Furies, and the short story collection Delicate Edible Birds and Florida. She's won the Story Prize and has been a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Groff's work regularly appears in The New Yorker, The Atlantic, and elsewhere. I see it everywhere, and I love it. And she's named one of Granta's 2017 Best Young American Novelists. So that is enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren and Sarah for some discussion. Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thank you, Shannon.
It's really an honor to be here. I'm so it's such a pleasure to be with all these booksellers, even though I can't see your faces. Maybe I will later. You know, Barnes & Noble has been such a huge supporter of Lauren, and the book club pick was so much fun to put together, the special edition, and so we're just really happy to be able to give back a little bit right now. I'm gonna normally I would ask Lauren to sort of explain the book at this point, but do you want to give like a one sentence, Lauren, or assume that most people are familiar with it?
I'm actually really interested to see what you would say. So you explain the book, Sarah, because you're the editor.
I mean, the thing we have Marie de France, Lauren has crafted this character who is based a little bit on historical figure, but she's given herself this freedom to imagine what this strong feminist woman would have been like in a time when that wasn't what you were supposed to be, right? I mean, that's one of the things that there's so many different ways to talk about this book. Marie moves to an abbey and sort of finds her talents and her strengths in creating a community and a sort of female utopia at a time when women were defined by, you know, the men they were married to and the children they gave birth to, and you know, she instead gives these women vocation and identity but there's so many different ways to talk about the book, and that's why I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, one of the things that I find myself wanting to talk about every time I talk about this book is it's a historical novel set in 12th century. But it's every page I was thinking about the contemporary world. I mean, you know, every, you know, gender dynamics, politics, climate change, you know, so and I've been struck by some of the reviews have said, you know, that's what's so remarkable about reading this book right now at a time when, you know, there's so many books are dealing either directly with the world or are just, you know, about ruin. And you are writing about the world that we're in, but you're doing it with a story of creation almost. Anyway, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to the idea of the book, or what you wanted to accomplish when you started writing it?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I have to apologize for my dog, who's adorable, but she's very excited because I'm very excited to talk to you all right now. So she's just running around and making like a wild noise, and I should have kicked her outside. Sorry. So I actually had to come to terms, as you know, Sarah, when I started writing the historical fiction, again, which is something that I've done in the past. And I actually said out loud to a bunch of MFA students, I think in 2015, that I would never write a historical fiction again, because I was looking at it wrong, right? At the time, I was looking at it as escapism. But in fact, what was happening when I started writing historical fiction again was I realized that the contemporary world for me is so vast, so swift. The moral implications are so overwhelming. It's almost like, you're trying to swim against a tsunami. And I felt that I needed to be able to just, like, in order to live with myself, to engage with the world in a moral way, but in order to do it with any sort of thought and perspective, I had to do it, tell it slant, right? In the Emily Dickinson way. And one of my favorite contemporary writers is Ali Smith, who's just like a mega genius. And she writes a lot, often very frequently, about historical fiction or through historical fiction. And she said this one thing, and I'm going to quote it to you. She says, a work of art unfixes time, the shaft opens, the past and present exist in the same moment, and we know as beings that we are connected. And so that became my project, right, is to open the shaft of time, to actually sort of to speak from the present into the past into the present, and have this sort of resonance back and forth. I think I've used this before, but it's like a tuning fork, right? You're trying to make a pitch sound between two notes, because, I mean, the reader picking up a new book in a bookstore knows that it's written in the 21st century. I mean, like, we're not pretending that we're writing it from the 12th century. So to pull them in and to make them make the links between the past and the present, to make it all like vibrant and on the page, it was a political, moral thing for me to do, to make sure that I wasn't just engaging in escapism, that I was actually, really, really talking about important, urgent things.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that it's written in present tense also helps. That helps that, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting publishing a book like this, because, I mean, first of all, it's just the next book by Lauren Groff. So, like, you have, swarms of people wanting to read whatever you're doing. But there are, when I talk about the subject matter, there are people who are like 12th century nuns, I'm there. And then there are people who are like, wait, I'm not Catholic, like, I don't, and it's been fun to press it into the hands of those people who think, because it takes like a page and a half for them to become immersed and to see how much more it is than what they think, how much more, I mean, nuns are so much more than what they thought, right? And what you're doing with them. Do you want to tell the group a little bit about how you discovered that about nuns?
Sure. No, I'm in love with nuns. Right? I love them so much. I mean, all of my books come out of a collision of like passionate questioning or love, right? I mean, that's where my books come from, I think. And for a long, long time, for 2 decades now, since college, when I thought I was going to be a medievalist and was deeply versed in Ancien Français, which is Old French. I've been in love with Marie de France, who is this real figure, this historical woman, the first published poet in French that we know of. I've loved her. And so this has been sitting in the back of my mind for a long time. And then the nuns came out of, I was at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, which is this lovely, wonderful thing at Harvard, where they invite academics and artists to come together and actually have this wild dissemination of ideas between people. So, like, I know so much about black holes now because of all of my astrophysicist friends, and I love them. I think it's so fascinating. And one day I went to a lecture by my friend, Dr. Katie Bugis, who's at Notre Dame. She's this like so extraordinary human, very, very powerful about the way that she communicates her love of her subject, which is the liturgy of medieval nuns. And I sat there, thinking, oh, this is interesting. It's sort of feeding my like medievalist monkey heart. But as she was speaking, I got more and more excited and passionate because she was talking about basically the liturgy, the daily liturgy of the nuns. And it was so like, I actually felt like I had a revolution inside of me as I was sitting there, and I saw, these two separate incidents sort of coming together and sort of exploding into a book that I knew that I could write. The other thing too is I had just the night before come back on a plane, and I'd seen this great 1940s movie called The Women, which it's so good. It's so well written. It's only female characters, but because it's the 1940s, the only topic of conversation that they have are the men that you don't actually end up seeing. And so it's like this, an amazing thing just barely missed, right? Like, so I was sitting there going, oh my God, right? Like, and so the book came to me not as like a Marie vision in the book. It wasn't necessarily, I'm not a mystic, but it was definitely sometimes the clouds part and you are given a story. And I think this is one of those times when the clouds parted and I was given a story.
I love that. I love that because in so many ways, like you said, there's this sort of this tension between the moment the book is set and the moment that it's written, and then in between there is this movie from like another era, right? That also informed. What do you think for people who are sort of who have read Fates and Furies, who have read Arcadia, like what do you see the commonality between them in terms of sort of your interest in communities and sort of isolated communities? Or
yeah, it's every book I think and I hope that I am in some ways destroying the previous book. Maybe destroying is too powerful a word, but I guess breaking the spell on me by the previous book. So every book I'm actually trying to write against the things that I've done before or in a different direction to them. Not because I don't like them, but because I have a horror of becoming a writer who does the same thing over and over again, right? And I like, if that happens to me, I will retire early. So I thought going into this book that I was doing something so radically different, and then halfway through the first draft, I was like, oh my God, I'm writing again about utopian communities again, which is something that every single novel
is radically different, though. I didn't mean to suggest that it's not. I mean, the thing that every writer I work with has that fear about writing the same thing twice, but some of them, it's a valid fear. For you, it's so not. And I actually, I mean, I love that there is this, that where the places where the works do overlap, it's inspiring for the reader to recognize them, but you do reinvent so completely from project to project. And even, I mean, in every single one of your books, your sentences are exquisite and like, energetic and just, sort of accomplishing so much in and of themselves. And yet, if you look at your sentences from book to book to book, you wouldn't necessarily think that they were written by the same person. And that is really remarkable. There are not a lot of writers who, or they do that, but like only one of them is really enjoyable, right? Like this is the mode that you should stay in, but that's not true for you.
I'm so happy you said that. And like, of course, I mean, you're my ideal reader. But I try so hard to match the story and the mode, right? There's this amazing Frank Lloyd Wright quote about form and function that has been misunderstood. Form and function must be one joined in spiritual union. And so this is something that I think about quite often, sort of the spiritual union, the beautiful marriage of the line and the book. It's almost oh my God, it's like fractals, right? Like the way that some snowflakes minuscule in the actual molecular function look like the larger and snowflake. I want my sentences to be fractals of the whole, right? Like to encapsulate, each one needs to encapsulate the whole in a certain way. So like and not every story that I tell is the same story, right? And I like Hemingway-esque clean line wouldn't work for a lot of the stories that I'm telling, because I like ambiguity and he doesn't. He likes clarity, right? I like I guess I like questions. I like murkiness and mystery and surprise. And so like I think a lot of times, dependent on the kind of story that I'm telling, I'll reach for the long line, the sort of beautiful Proustian long line, but in other books, other stories, it's just not appropriate and it doesn't work. So yeah, I try very, very hard to sort of match the way that I'm telling the story with the story being told.
Yeah. I think that's part of why the reader has such an immersive experience in the book, though, because it means sort of the medium that we are traveling through like matches the story. And so, it's like you're imbibing the setting, right? As you are like reading the prose. Yeah.
Well, sentences, it's so, I have this developing theory about the sentence, which I would like to actually do research into the semantic aspects of a sentence, right? Because I do, somatic, so not semantic, somatic aspects of it. Because I think, and semantic, I guess, but I think that we experience sentences first through our physical form, right? Our animal form, and they don't just feed directly into the brain. We hear them in our ear, the crunchiness, like the labile. We all have a little voice, I think, inside as we're reading. We hear it, we see it with the inner eye. And sometimes we even taste, smell, whatever. But the very, very first reaction before the brain even kicks in is somatic, right? So I would like to actually go and try to like parse out how different elements of a sentence actually affect us physically first. Because you're right. I think that the thing that I'm always seeking, and I have no science behind it, it's all just guts and trial and error, is to sort of to do that microcosm, that mini version of the whole in individual line, right? Not to get too nerdy, but I just got very, very nerdy and very excited about it.
I think, I mean, most readers don't necessarily aren't thinking about that stuff. They're just reading for the story. However, I do think it all matters. I mean, no matter what kind of reader you are, whether you're, looking at sentences or not, the work that the writer does one way or the other does affect the experience. And in this case, I think for sure, I think there's not a reader who reads this book and doesn't sort of internalize the story and the experiences, the exhilaration that Marie feels. And how did you were you thinking about? Well, so you said the movie, so you were thinking about the idea of sort of making it a female-only story from the start. That was part of your original intent.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, because I did want, I wanted a number of things. One was we were in the throes of he who shall not be named, the Voldemort years. And I, just in terms of my own mental health, I needed to escape to my lesbian separatist utopia, which is what I call this, or like this is sort of what I wanted to do. But I also, there's such one of the threads I write about in American contemporary life is the distrust of female power in particular. And I think that coming out of 2016, there are a lot of people who are like, oh my God, right? We will never get to have a female president. And one of the people that I was thinking through as I wrote the first few drafts of this is the great academic Judith Butler, who said at this one point, she said, power not only acts on a subject, but in a transitive sense, enacts the subject into being. And that was one of these things that is like, okay, so let's talk about female power. Let's talk about the way that it acts upon Marie and enacts her into being. So there's this double swing happening here within the tightly confined community.
Yeah, it's a really interesting look at power and the good and less good effects of power. I mean, the ways that she's changed. And I mean, there's I can't quote it exactly, maybe you can. There's a passage where you talk about how sort of every person or every group needs to believe in a power bigger than themselves, right? By which you might mean God or a president or like, patriarch, matriarch, the sort of the ways that people crave that sort of structure and leadership. And when you compare the convent, the abbey to, before Marie, when there really was like a power absence, a vacuum, leadership vacuum, to, how happy and empowered actually the other nuns are once she's there and giving them sort of purpose and meaning, but then also how her relationship to her, the sort of power hierarchy. So she's like, powerful, looking down upon her nuns, but then she's like obsessed with the power above her, which is Eleanor. That is a great love story. It's like my favorite love story.
Well, it's predicated on ideas of courtly love. There are these codified ideas in the 12th and 13th century. A lot of the stories of courtly love actually came out of Eleanor of Aquitaine's court. And there were these rules set in place. And it's actually really amazing to go look them up, because you think, oh my gosh, this is wild, because this is so subversive. It's so anti the teachings of the church. For one of the major rules, possibly the largest rule, is that marriage on either side doesn't stop the power of true love, right? Like, and that's adultery, right? That's like, but also things like direct talking about true love makes it not true love. Like the acquisition of true love makes true love fall apart. So Marie actually internalized a lot of these ideas and these rules in the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine. It became her narrative substructure that she tried to pin her own life on, and then perhaps in the exigencies of actual life, she couldn't really live up to a lot of these narratives, because she's, she's I'm trying to say this in a way that's not spoilery, but maybe it doesn't matter, right? It's a profound love story that's also a hate story, that's also like a modeling story, that's also like from the beginning she knows that it'll never be consummated, and that is the reason for the love. Yeah.
Right. Which then maybe leads us to the other kinds of love that are acted upon in the Abbey, which I love that it, people's ideas, maybe people's ideas about nuns will be different now actually, but people think of nuns in this very sort of cold, kind of pristine, celibate way. And from the minute I read your first draft, I was like just struck by the warmth and like the physicality of these women and their, and their sexuality and their friendship with each other. And yeah, I love that you show how it probably really is.
Well, I mean, I think they are probably less carnal than my nuns are, but again, right? Like, I'm the great animal, and I really do experience the world most powerfully and fully through the body, and so of course I'm gonna give that as a gift to these people. I care very much about these characters, right? I love them so much. Why can't they delight in food, right? Why can't they delight in the feel of a pond in the night when it's so hot and your body flushed, right?
I was just thinking about that scene. Yeah, I can feel it almost right now.
Yeah, one needs that, you know, that pleasure, that profound pleasure. And I know that the vast history of the church argues against that sort of corporeal, carnal pleasure. But I think you take that away, and what do you have? I mean, you can have inner animation, inner love, love of God. All of these things are incredible, passionate, wonderful. But I think God, you know, if they exist, gave us a body full of pleasure for a reason, right? I mean, like, this is part of Marie's own thing, that that the body, the flesh should not be mortified. The flesh should be enjoyed. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're coming up upon the time of when I'm supposed to hand it over. Is there anything that you want me to we need to say before we
I just want to say, this is the only time I get to talk in front of a group with you, and I just love you. Thank you for being the greatest editor on the planet. I really adore you. Thank you.
Thank you. It is like the greatest thrill to work with Lauren Groff, book after book, and to see not just each of her masterpieces, but how one leads to the other is that is a pleasure that I think I hold for myself, the process, but it's really a huge privilege. So. Allison, are you gonna?
Yeah, that was awesome, you guys. I loved you before. I love you even more now. I wish we could all be in a big room and just have like one big sisterly hug with everybody. This was wonderful. So for people who have questions, if you want to, please, because your names don't show up on the teams, it just has your store name. So please drop your name in the chat, and I'll go down in order and call on you guys with questions. And we'll get started on that. We have booksellers from all over the country joining us today. And we will start with Jamie. Jamie, so when you guys ask your question, if you want to turn your camera on, so that way Lauren can see you. Thanks.
So,
Hi, Jamie.
So I just wanted to say I loved how fleshed out Marie was in this book, and I especially loved the richly nuanced relationships that she had with all the women in her life. In particular, I think my favorites were with Eleanor and Wolfheld, Goda, and I especially love that scene with Matilda. So I was wondering, other than Marie, did you have a particular character that was a favorite of yours to write in this book, or was there a favorite relationship to write in this book?
You know, the person that I love probably the most, you know, after Marie is Githa, the mad nun with the blue teeth. I love her so much. I love her so much because I think that in the contemporary world we would be much crueler to her. There's an echo. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I love Githa.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go over to Chrissy.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm from Columbia, Missouri. Love the book. I just was curious. I read in an article that you did spend a lot of time researching, spent a lot of time with the nuns. I was curious if there were any of the kind of minimalistic habits that they had that you still are practicing now.
Oh, such a great question. So I didn't spend a huge amount of time. I spent a little bit of time at this great abbey in Connecticut called Regina Laudis. It's like, and I'm in love with every one of the nuns that I talked to there. They're like they're amazing people. A lot of them had really rich and full lives before they decided to go into the convent. And so, you know, one of my favorites is Mother Angeli. And Mother Angeli was, she worked with the Metropolitan Opera for, I want to say 30 years. She sort of was a coordinator with opera singers. Like she's like such a smart, wonderful human. I think their lives are so full of joy. And I think that is the thing that I walked away from, like feeling very profoundly, that, you know, it's the form of the day, the discipline of the day, going and praying. I think they pray 6 times a day. And then like there are hours that you go and you know, chop wood, or you bake bread, or you make cheese, right? Like you're doing these things. I love that. And I really responded to it on a very emotional way. Like my Sarah knows this, but my propensity is just to be highly disciplined in my daily life and my daily schedule. But seeing this community of women doing that was really moving, and it also liberated them in a certain way to ideas and thoughts that I think that otherwise, you know, in a less disciplined day, they may not have had. I thought that was really, really beautiful. The other thing that devastated me and wanted me to rethink my entire life was a lot of the nuns at Regina Latis are getting older now. And there are relatively few younger nuns. And some of the younger nuns are being asked to go back and get a nursing degree in order to take care of the older nuns into death. But it was so beautiful to imagine being surrounded for 40, 50 years by these women that you love very much, and having them be there and take care of you into death. I mean, it's the opposite of the way that the world is built now, right? I mean, where you go into a hospital, overworked, beautiful hospital workers who don't know you are sort of escorting you into death. And I think that this idea of love extending all the way through life was, and the love of the community was so powerful and so moving. It really made me want to become a nun in some ways. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that answer. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Christy. All right, next we'll go to Pam.
Hi,
Hi,
Lauren.
Pam.
Of course, I enjoyed the book as everyone else did. I was particularly taken with the relationship, I guess, friendship between Marie and Cecily. And I especially the scene where Cecily is telling Marie, you know, later in life that it's because she wasn't beautiful that was so fortunate, and also that she didn't do all this on her own. And that scene just hit me because of how it rocked Marie as well. And I just wondered if you could tell us more about that relationship or comment on that scene in particular.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely me thinking about power, and the power that we give to beauty and our own lack thereof and others' possession of, but also the way that narratives, heroic narratives in particular, sort of elect one person to get glory and beauty. But I actually think that is counter to the way that humans are, right? And all of her life, I mean, we really do, like, I know my name is on the book, but Sarah McGrath's name should also be on the book, right? The cover designer's name should be on the book. Everyone, like, if it were fair, it would be like a movie where every single name is sort of listed. So I think, you know, Marie has this narrative in herself that, you know, she's a scrapper against this disadvantage of her life and her body and her illegitimacy, and she's able to triumph, when in reality, a lot of the things that she took for granted, including the people around her, were the things that made her actually successful and actually do what she needed to do. It's a very counter, I guess, the hierarchical setup that she had come to internalize as the right system. Even as she was trying to subvert it too. So I think that there's a push-pull inside of her, and I wanted to sort of delineate the tensions, the very oppositional, contradictory tensions there. Thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. All right, next we'll go to Ashlyn.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. We're in Fayetteville, North Carolina, store 2934. First of all, congratulations. I saw the list this and freaked out. Was like, I'm meeting her today. So thank you. I, this book was so interesting. It's not something I've ever had interest in before, but I actually sold it to a big military guy yesterday who wanted to learn more about feminism and said he read fiction better than he read nonfiction. And I said, if you learn about the power of women and like women's power through the ages, this is a great place to start. So thank you for that. He was excited.
I just a little bit. Thank you. Oh my God.
I'm glad. I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts when he comes back. But one of the things that was so interesting to me is, first of all, I really identified with what you all were talking about earlier, that there's this almost like haze of the ages across this book, that you sort of feel that distance of the ancient in the way you write. So thank you for that. But at the same time, in some of the scenarios where you talked about the nuns, I felt viscerally like I was among them, like the hip to hip morning breath kind of feeling. And this was my introduction to your work. So I didn't realize you talked about like closed communities before, but what are things in your life that have influenced that understanding of community and seeing it so viscerally, that you were able to write about it viscerally?
What a great question. I think it all comes back to the fact that I was raised in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere. I'm from Cooperstown, New York, which in the summer there's a huge influx of tourists, and all of the people from there just sort of like hide in their houses and go swim in the lake. But it's under 2,000 people, and in the winter there's one stoplight, there's no movie theater, like you can't get out. It's basically you're like stuck on the arc. And I loved it. I loved it because you can see the reverberations of things that happen. You can see the way that, say your friend comes to school sad because their parents are splitting up, and you start to notice that other families are getting, right? Like, oh, wait a second, there's maybe something happening under the surface here. So it's an enclosed place where tensions feel like they're a little bit exacerbated because they're in the tight form. And then you can also track the way that one small movement affects a large group of people, so coming from a very tiny town with almost nothing to do, it was a really great introduction to being a writer, right? Because the interest is the same, right? It's trying to understand the reverberations out of an action, and personality differences which get exacerbated as people are in a tight place. Yeah. But also, I would love to live in a commune. I've always wanted to live in a commune, and my husband is very bougie, so we will never live in a commune.
Well, thank you very much. I'm from a tiny town as well, so that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
and it
so
makes
you
me
get
think of the section where, 400 people. Yeah. Marie talks about if she could love Goda, like she could love anyone kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like, and it makes me think of that moment. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ashlyn. I have to say, my friends and I have a dream about retiring on a commune together too. It's our dream. We always scout out locations and
oh my gosh, that's all I want to do.
Yeah. All right, we'll go over to Florencia.
Hello.
Hi.
So nice to finally meet you.
Same.
I actually have a question for Marie. Can I ask Marie a question? Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm dying to ask her. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. My question would be, when does she become a mom? All of a sudden, she starts talking about her daughters. And it's after the first revelation, she becomes an abbess herself. And all of a sudden, this strong, powerful, independent woman becomes a mother and talks about her daughters. And I love it, but at the same time, it's sometimes feels contradictory. So I want to know, to her, I want to ask her, how do you feel about it? And when did you feel this switch? When did you feel all these peers around you became your daughters?
I love it. I'm speaking for this character. I would say that she would say, and she's whispering in my ear right now, that it was during the difficult time when she had a lot of doubt and darkness, and she heard the heifer lowing for her calf. And she sort of sensed this emanation of love outward. And it was toward the calf, it was toward the heifer, and it was toward all of the women that she suddenly saw were under her care, and that she had to be there for. And that was the night that they became her daughters. I think that's what she would say. Sarah, would you say something different?
No, I love that answer.
No, I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I also thank you, because there's never a chance that I get to ask the character. So yay, thank you.
You know Hilary Mantel, of whom I love so much, but she has this practice where she's beginning to write about a historical character, and she'll set up 2 actual chairs in the middle of the room, and she'll sit down on one chair and invite the character into the other chair, and then sit there for hours just talking to the ghost of the character. It's so amazing. You can see her doing that too, right? I mean, like, yes, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. All right, we'll shoot it over to Brianna.
Hello.
Hi, Brianna.
Hi. So you talked about writing about isolated communities. In what ways was it different focusing on the leader, Marie, as opposed to a follower like Bit in Arcadia?
Oh my God, this is the first time anyone's ever asked this question. I love it. Thank you. It was profoundly different, right? With Bits, my perception of Arcadia was sort of where he ended up. That was the first thing that went into understanding that character, because where he ended up was in the real world after having been raised in this utopian community that was really, really beautiful in a lot of ways, but failed in other ways. And so I think I wanted to discover how a child raised in such a place would be affected by that, and would have both a difficult time fitting into the world at large, but also would be in some ways almost too beautiful for the world, right? Like he's to be, he's my favorite of all the characters that I've ever made. Like Bit is actually in me very, very deeply. He's the one that I would want to protect with my life. So I think the difference was that, I guess it was the questions that were nebulous at the start of both texts. With Arcadia, my big, deep, burning question, I was just then having children. The question was, could it ever possibly be moral to bring children into a world like this, right? Like, could it be a moral choice? And of course, I didn't come up with any answers. And I ended up bringing children into this world. And with Marie's story, the nebulous questions were very different. They were about the ideas of power, female power, the ideas of like how I guess one of the big contemporary ideas was, how did we get to where we are now at the brink of possible climate apocalypse? And I kind of wanted to trace that back through a millennium to the time of the Crusades, because I feel like it comes out of the same impulse, this imperialism, this sort of rabid consumption of the world at large comes out of the time of the Crusades. And so that was one of the big questions that I was having too at the very, very beginning. So I think that the difference was really just the questions that I wanted to ask and wanted to like circle over the course of writing the book. But what an amazing question. Thank you. I'm so excited. Like nobody's ever asked me that. I haven't thought it through.
Well, thank you. It was an amazing answer.
Thank you so much. I have one last question for you. I'm going to kick it back to Shannon, and she'll close us out with the questions.
I've just been sitting here fangirling the whole time. I'm so excited to just hear the amazing questions we've had, and just hearing about your perspective and how you approach writing and wanting to do something different every time. But the thread of your writing and the physicality that's throughout each book just makes each book is so special. So that's a treat. So speaking of differentiating. Do you have plans for what could potentially come next, or what other project or what questions you want to ask for a next book?
I am kicking this over to my editor, Sarah McGrath, who can talk about it, actually.
I'm not going to say too much about the next project, but I'm in the process of rereading it right now, actually, and it's been so. I want to do this every time, like read. I'm reading Lauren's work at the same time that I'm like reading her reviews. Like I'm thinking about Lauren and like the big picture at the same time that I'm reading the sentences about the next book. And the next book is also historical, a different period in time, different land, different character, obviously. But there is definitely continuity of themes, not in an overt way, but it's really electric to think about the two books together, and I can't wait. I mean, the next book for sure stands on its own, just in the way that Matrix stands on its own. But someday people are going to write their dissertations on Lauren Groff, and they're going to like talk about the invisible conversation happening between the two books. It's cool.
That's the best answer ever. Yay! Usually it's like, hey, we'll see. That's perfect. It's done.
Yep. I love the next book. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I hope it'll come out. Yes.
What?
We do too.
Well, you never know. Supply chain issues apparently are big. If I have to like write it by hand for every single reader, I'll do it. It's fine.
Old school typewriter.
That's right. I have one.
Barnes & Noble will have it prominently in front. Oh, I was going to send you a picture. Somebody sent me the picture of this great Barnes & Noble display of Matrix. It's like this big Lauren Groff thing. So I have to send that to you.
Oh yeah, please do. Thank you.
Well, this was
so fun. Thank you.
Yeah. No, please go ahead. I was just going to say thank you so much. This was wonderful, and a wonderful, wonderful day to close out the week and kick off the weekend. And huge congratulations to you again, not only on the book coming out, but also it being a Barnes Noble Book Club and the National Book Award. So it's wonderful. So all the best to you, and thank you so much for spending your time with us, to you and Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you both. I love. Thank you all the booksellers. We love you. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you.